Tired of the same boring health talk radio? Then turn up the volume and break off the knob. This is the Robert Scott Bell Show.
We're back. Check out all the links at robertscottbell.com. You can also call me 24/7. That is, beyond the time we're on live on the radio on GCN on Sundays, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can leave a message with your question or comments. We've been responding to them during the week a lot. And that's 866-939-BELL, 866-939-2355. On with Liam Scheff, and we're going to be joined in studio by another guest here, surprise guest coming in, and we're going to talk further about the human aspect here of immune deficiency, people wanting to help people genuinely. We want that to happen, but we want to be cautious and guide people if we can as to the way to do it properly, if there is such a thing to call it properly, but certainly to be aware of the dangers of coming off the medicines. I mean, that's a weird thing for me to say on the show. Dangers of coming off medicine. Yes, there are dangers of coming off the medicine. And if you're aware of that, you can navigate the way through it. And it's going to take a little bit, but that's what we're here to help you out with. Liam Scheff is in studio as well. LiamScheff.com. I have him linked up through the blog notes at robertscottbell.com as well. Liam, glad to have you on board. I want you to introduce your friend momentarily.
最近どこですか、Uramoto-san? My friend is here. We're going to call her Maria for the purpose of protecting her work. And she was somebody who was exposed to this information, has done a number of months of intensive research and thrown herself into this with the passion and, I should say, diligence of somebody who's already working in a clinical field. So she's reading all of the papers and reading all of the reviews and debates and so on and so forth, and coming to an understanding that this is a much more complicated immune problem than a single cause mutant sex thing that nobody can pin down. That's just fiction. But I'll let her tell her story. I'll just say that I was very impressed by the fact that I rarely meet people who come into this information who are not personally supposedly infected, who actually are willing to make a change in their own lives. But she was on a path, really a fast track, to being in a field, to making some money doing a job that she was training for, and she realized that HIV testing was all over that, and she made a different decision. I'll just throw it to her. Maybe you want to say a few words. Maria.
Maria, welcome to the Robert Scott Bell Show. Honored to have you in studio with us.
Thank you.
So what is it that brought you to this, to be able to discuss what we're talking about here? Did you hear the show that Liam and I did on the HIV fraud testing day liberation last year? Or what was it that brought you at least closer in the awareness, the light bulb, so to speak?
I did hear that show, but that was after I had read a message from a friend that she just put on one of the social networking pages that said something to the effect of HIV does not cause AIDS, but toxic drugs do. And that was just something that kind of stuck in my head, because at the time I was going to be interviewing for internships for grad school to work with the LGBT community, which was a population I really wanted to work with for many years. And
so if you were going to counsel them, that community, you were obviously going to be confronted with a lot of people with the so-called HIV/AIDS stigma.
Right.
Right, okay.
And that's what I saw when I started going on the interviews, was the posters everywhere, the testing, and I remembered her message. So that was during the interviews. About a week later or 2 weeks later, I found out that someone that I care for very deeply was affected by this as well, and that's when I asked her about it. And she then directed me to your show, to the documentaries, to so much information.
House of Numbers as well. You saw the film, right? Okay.
Yes.
And at this point, I mean, how fast can you put this kind of new information together where it doesn't make your head explode? I mean, this is coming from 0 to 120 miles an hour now.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I spent from the first. In a million years, I never would have thought this was what that message meant. I thought, well, maybe the drugs are toxic, but there's a better drug or something. Like, I never thought it was what it was. So when she started sending me these links, I literally would go to work, go to class, get out at like 10 o'clock at night, and be at home, locked in my room, on the internet for hours, reading, watching every documentary that's available, and just felt like I was in a dream or something.
Now, could you then come out with this information, go back into school and start asking questions and talking about it, or would you be done with school at that? They'd throw you out?
No, I could never tell them this information, which was the problem, because I got offered the internship that I really wanted, and I had to turn it down because there was just no way that I could work with that. It was
in conflict with what you had just learned.
Totally.
Well, you chose to turn it down because a lot of people do work that they don't believe in morally. It's a paycheck. They like some of it. They say it's imperfect. That's what it was impressive when we were talking yesterday. Talking about HIV testing and the number of ways that it's obviously and completely fraudulent. And you were expressing that you understood that, you had read that. What stopped you from going into this community, the gay bacon, lettuce, and tomato? No, GBLT.
LBGTL. Yeah, that's
I always continue. So the bacon, lettuce, and tomato.
Catch up with that.
You go into this community that you care about, and I care. I got a lot of gay friends, and it's part of my life to care about these people who are my friends, but to me they're stigmatized and they're hunted and hounded by this thing. But what stopped you from taking money, taking a career path that was open to you? What stopped you?
I mean, the reason I wanted to work with this population is because I care a great deal about the population, and if I have this information, how could I do that? How am I helping them? It wasn't an option for me.
Right.
There wasn't a choice. The only choice was to not do it.
Well, Liam, you and I have talked about on the daily show that we do the point of pivot, if we will, this year, 2012. We talked about a year of consciousness, a pivot point. This is really, Maria's story is one of those stories that is showing that consciousness is shifting, that the information is getting through. It's not just hitting and bouncing off. I mean, here's someone that took it to heart so much that said, I made a decision that affects my future, my career, my choices. And that also tells me that what we're seeing now is people are going to the point where they can't live in violation with their own set of core principles. Like it seems to be the human condition now in the Western world. Yes, you just live a lie and you just make do. You get your money and you go on. That there is something more happening here that is beyond even this so-called HIV discussion that we're having, that we've talked about for so long. This is putting the face on what is happening out there in the so-called real world beyond the microphone.
It's very impressive to me. It's very rare to meet somebody who has the courage of their convictions. I find a lot of people, look, the term I use a lot when I'm debating these doctors, I get to a point with them and they admit that the tests are highly imperfect and suspect to, maybe needing a lot of review. And then they admit that the drugs are highly imperfect and probably very toxic and perhaps we need better things. At some point, they admit that their entire way of thinking is highly imperfect and highly suspect. And at which point, I have a term I use for them. I call them intellectual cowards. So you understand all of this, but you don't have the courage of your convictions. You will not make a single change because apparently bread is being buttered sufficiently that you don't want to. Maybe I'm lucky and I don't really make any money or have much to speak of, not compared to these doctors, right? So I can have the courage of my convictions, but I chose that path. I admire somebody who has the courage of their convictions.
Well, we're going to talk more about this on the other side of that break, and we'll talk also about some things to look out for if you know people that are in this situation, that have been on the medicines, that come off. We'll give you some tips and insights here on the Robert Scott Bell Show after this.
The information is so good, it requires no expiration date. The Robert Scott Bell Show.
Now, I know some of my listeners are going to say, hey, why are you talking about this AIDS stuff again? It doesn't affect me. It doesn't impact my life, whatever. The reality is the pharmaceutical industrial complex wants you. They want you bad. They're going to go any which way they can. If it's not AIDS, it's something else like restless leg syndrome. Or you name the...
Where'd my leg go?
Where'd my leg? I can't stop my leg. They're going to find a way to convince you through fear, right? It's the influenza virus, the one that the CDC is concocting to make it human-to-human transmission. I mean, there are all kinds of crazy things. And this happens to be one of the biggest, craziest, deadliest, scariest of so many over the years that was constructed almost out of thin air, but based on people's willingness to live a lifestyle that was conducive for immune deficiency and immune collapse. They took advantage of a community, and the community honestly was somewhat guilty of being willing to be taken advantage of by looking for an escape route for some lifestyle issues that were, in any field, heterosexual or homosexual, that were over the top. And so we now deal with that syndrome of billions and billions of dollars stolen from U.S. taxpayers or people from around the world to focal point on poisoning them back to health, in reality poisoning them to death. And this is something that is, goes well beyond just the so-called AIDS community. And, as Maria is here in studio talking about it, you begin to recognize, I imagine, that even though you were focused in one area, you begin to see that bigger picture of the pharmaceuticalization of all life.
Oh, absolutely. I made a ton of changes myself in my own diet and not taking, medicine if I had a headache, not running to the Tylenol, and just it's so much information. It's a lot to digest, but I'm making changes myself as well. Even
probiotics? You get some probiotics?
I did.
All right.
I did get some for my friend.
Hey, shout out to Jonathan, who's got Dr. O'Hara's up there for us. He's at 866-424-1077, 866-424-1077. Again, restoring integrity to the terrain. Now, you're in a university setting learning about these things. Do you ever remember any of the biology or other classes you may have taken talking about the law of the terrain? Was that something that was discussed at all?
Undergrad school was
no.
long time ago.
Yeah.
No,
well, you look so young, like you're just out of college.
37.
No way. Oh, my gosh. Well, you're doing well, so the probiotics are working.
You incorrigible flirt, you.
Well, you're good looking too.
Well, thank you.
He's got his scruff on. So,
boy.
He's a rough and tumble guy. Okay. Leah, what do you think? I mean, listen,
just on my legs. Go ahead.
I'm so encouraged by what I'm hearing here, because if one person has impacted their life this way positively, how they're going to, pay that sort of forward. Don't be showing me your legs. If you had the video cam up there, you'd be turning it off right
now. Look, she bought some Dr. O'Hara's stuff, some good probiotics, and we're kind of working from that angle. Now, just earlier this year, last month, we had somebody, a person called Nassim, I think, works in the HIV/AIDS field and quit it. And she said, "I've seen so much. It's all about the money. I've seen people who were supposed to be HIV positive die of, and it was the drugs, even though it was a friend of mine." And we played some of that audio. So There are defectors to the church of if you have sex once 20 years earlier and you don't remember it, it'll kill you eventually, no matter how many drugs you do. It doesn't matter. No, that's the religion. The religion, it does matter how many drugs you do. It matters how you take care of yourself. It matters how many pesticides and antibiotics you eat. All of that matters. The AIDS religion says your life doesn't matter, your lifestyle, and I don't mean your sexual choice. I mean how you live and eat and the drugs you put into yourself.
Nothing matters.
They say none of it matters. Only we can tell you what's happening to you. That's like the corrupt medieval Catholic Church. It's not like the spiritual path. There's something wrong with it.
Yeah. Well, this is something that, it was an awakening in my life as well about what I eat matters. What do you mean what you eat matters? Of course, now, as I talked about on Friday's Healing Revolution show on the Robert Scott Bell Show, orthorexia. That now suddenly, if you're eating well, that's a disorder and a disease.
Right.
It is an amazing thing that's happening out there, and they're trying their level best. It's like the Church of Biological Mysticism, modern medicine, trying to don't stray from the flock. Don't leave this pew. Come on back.
Yoga's bad for you.
What?
Yoga's bad for you.
Yoga too. That's right. Very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Yeah.
Eating well is terrible.
Pop a rib.
Oh my God.
But I want you to get that silica in you, and we're going to be right back. Make sure you say thanks to all our sponsors here on the Robert Scott Bell Show. We're grateful to be here. Lots more healing to do, and political healing as well coming up. But right now we've got Maria in studio, special guest, friend of Liam's, and believe me, this is really a special time where you're willing to share this kind of awakening and what you do, because now the question is, you're still in school, I assume, and now you've got a lot of decisions to make. You've already made some that are very we could say courageous and brave, but I think appropriate and correct, and then would allow you to sleep well at night. But at the same time, people go, well, what are you going to do now? How are you going to make sense of not only information, but how do I integrate that into my life?
Yes, so I had to scramble the last couple of weeks to find another internship since I turned down the one working with LGBT. For now, I do still want to work with that community. I just understand that I will have to do so in a different capacity now, and I won't be able to do so working for any agency. I would have to do it within my own practice where I can give the message that I want to give, which is this message to give them, for them to have both, for them to understand both sides. I don't think they get that. Mm-hmm. I know I had no idea, so I don't think they get that the other side. So they're just not force-fed one side, but get both. And I know that I can't do that working for any agency. I'd have to do it on my own.
Well, how do you navigate the terrain knowing what to say and when? Because you could get a lot of backlash, and we know that. That's why we're protecting your identity here so that the school doesn't come down on you. But how to speak, when to speak, these kind of things. I mean, is it still a learning process, or you feel like you're comfortable, I'm just going to be quiet until somebody pulls it out of me? What do you think?
It is tricky. I'm still learning a lot, but I do know that I want to learn all that I can. I know that I have to be careful how and where I spread the message, especially being a licensed mental health counselor. I'm sure that there are ethical things they're going to make me kind of adhere to. But at the same time, I know this now. So there's you can't just forget. You can't turn it off. Right. So I have to figure it out.
Well, and since I'm orthorexic, what would you counsel me to do? Should I just stop eating healthy? Just obsessive, I know.
No, you should continue to eat healthy and teach us how to do so as well.
No, it's great. It's a very empowering message, and it's an exciting thing. I think it changes your life in many ways. If you're caught up in, let's say, a profession you've been in for 20, 30 years and you've invested your whole life, it's much more painful, I think. You were right at the verge of starting it, so maybe it isn't as traumatic, but it's not to say that it isn't affecting you in a big, big way. Your path you thought was this way, now suddenly you got to do a quick reverse and go, wait, it's going to be different now.
Yeah, I mean, for my career, it was a shock, but just in general, for life, for what I've believed for all these years, for the clients I have worked with that have died, that have had this condition, that is where it's, affects me more. Career-wise, you make the changes, you adjust. There's just no way for me to do anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, as they say, a good head on your shoulders. Yeah. Well, everybody out there listening now to the Robert Scott Bell Show, a lot of us are, if we haven't already been confronted with what Maria has just gone through, will be. And that's, not just because it's 2012, a pivot year, a conscious year, that kind of thing, but it's just the nature of nature right now, where a lot of the illusions that have just been accepted as real or truthful are now crumbling before our very eyes. So many of us, and many of you, maybe if you haven't been confronted with this yet, will be. And I've heard over the years, occasionally I'd hear from listeners that said, I changed my whole profession because of what I heard. I was in a nursing profession, and I couldn't find a way to do it with good conscience anymore, and they found a different way to be happy. It affected them economically. But the economics of scale in the medical profession, there's a big story out there. I mentioned last week, we might have to go into it further, where the doctors are acknowledging that they are going broke. The medical profession is not going to be the same. It used to be you go into doctoring, you're set for life, right? You're hundreds of thousands. No, it's not.
My son is a doctor.
My son, the doctor. Yes, exactly. And
well, I have a friend who just had a young family member, diagnosed with HPV. I said, it's fake. Just read about the HPV thing. So he's confronting that in his life. It's not his child. But it's a close family member. People are going to be confronted with this at school as their children are dragged in to be injected when the next round of make-believe flu. By the way, this whole we re-engineered the bird flu thing.
Yeah.
Hello, PSYOP, psychological operation. They didn't have a thing in the beginning. They didn't have a bird flu. They didn't. A few people died in Southeast Asia from being poisoned to death in hospitals after being exposed to toxins. They didn't have a bird flu. They never did. I read the papers. They didn't have any particular particle. They didn't have any tests for it. That's for darn sure. So now they're going to say they engineered it in the lab to be airborne. This is from a science fiction movie. Doctors aren't that smart. I'm telling you, they're not that smart. Nature is smarter than doctors. Even if they released this thing, if a couple people would get a cold and everybody would forget about it in a week. But they say this, and then I guarantee they're going to claim that it was released. I'm telling you. Well, they're going to claim it was released, and then they're going to claim that everybody needs to be vaccinated.
That's how it plays out.
I'm sounding like Alex Jones, but I'm telling you, they're just setting it up. And if you pay attention, you can knock it down and walk away. But if you're not, and you hear the Katie Courics of the world saying, we should be very concerned because if you believe these clowns, by the way, if you actually believe these clowns when they say there's a deadly bird flu pandemic that doesn't do anything, and they kill 250 million birds around the world, mostly free-range birds that people are farming, and then they say that they've tinkered with it enough to make it kill everybody, these are war criminals. I mean, if you believe them on the first count, then they should be arrested and probably executed in a public court. Now, I'm not suggesting that they should be because it's not real, but if you believe them, what they're doing is a war crime. So I don't believe them.
Well, and I do not either. We know that what we're talking about are toxicological assaults, environmental degradation assaults, nutrient deprivation assaults, all of these things that manifest as something that they can call a bird flu or AIDS or any other pharmaceutical construct. And that is the fear-making machinery. And Liam, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is the part of the story I don't know if I even got to last week when I mentioned that they were monkeying with the virus and altering it so it could be more human-to-human transmissible. When I said, listen, this is endogenous. You're not catching anything.
Right.
You're literally toxicologically destroyed from environmental factors. Some would say chemtrails. I had a big thing on chemtrails this week. Some would say pesticides, genetically modified organisms.
Oh, yeah.
We can go on and on. That will result in a disease that they will classify as what they want you to think it is, so they'll swoop in with their shots, needles, drugs, etc. Don't fall for it. Maria's not going to fall for it. Liam's not falling for it. You're listening to the Robert Scott Bell Show.